My favorite piece of advice, which I seem to be talking a lot about, and every time please don't be afraid to pivot. I find that that's another lesson I learned, and I'm so grateful for it, is I find sometimes as entrepreneurs or small businesses, we sometimes think we know best, or this is really what we want to do, and we want to launch it this way, and we want to implement it into the market this way, and we're not going to change it. And sort of we get stuck in our ways and become stubborn because we are the founder, right? Which is logical. It's not that it's not. But don't be, it's okay to pivot. It's okay to change, right? It's okay to say, oh, maybe I need to move 10% to the right, and maybe I need to go 20% to the left, and just have that sense of flexibility and not be afraid of it.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Muller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Karina Muller. And Karina started out originally growing up in Argentina. Family moved all around the world, moved around the world with their family, and then settled down a bit in the U.S. Going into high school, but still went back and forth between Argentina and then a little bit in Israel as well. So went to high school and studied for college in France, and got a few different degree or majors, including political science and history. Thought she wanted to be a lawyer, came from a lot of lawyers in the family, moved to Paris, found out she didn't want to be a lawyer, ended up working in retail and fashion, focused on apparel and product development. Also did a lot of traveling around the Asia area and around the world. And then transition to what she's doing with her current business. So with that much as a introduction, welcome on the podcast, Karina.
Thank you, Devin. That was quite an introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, absolutely. I have the innate ability to take everybody's life and condense it into the 30-second version. But with that, why don't we rewind and unpack a little bit and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started in Argentina and then moving around the world with your family?
Sure. I love that you referred to I come from a long line of lawyers, because you and my mom both intellectual property attorneys. So I feel like it's full circle that we're having this conversation, Devin. And that was actually, I have to say, when I thought I was going to be a lawyer, I really thought IP was the law I would practice. I definitely congratulate you on that. I think it's the most fun out of all of them. I think you come across the most diverse things, right? Whether it's founders, creators, inventors. Like I've loved growing up hearing all my mom's stories of her clients, and she was fortunate enough to have some really amazing and major clients. So I loved hearing all those fun IP stories, and also watching the transition of IP in tech, right? Which is a whole, I'm sure you can do a whole other podcast just on that, which is really great. But anyway, so yeah, we, born in Argentina, like you mentioned, and entrepreneurial father, who actually at the time worked for Levi's, and Levi's decided to bring him to the States and move us around in the States. And then my mom being an attorney, and so that kind of, also moved us around. And just my dad feeling a need to create businesses and develop businesses and sell businesses. And clearly he incorporated that in all his children, because we are all entrepreneurs, or got the entrepreneur bug at a very early age. And people love to ask, how does in one family do you produce 3 entrepreneurs? And just have a crazy entrepreneurial father and a mother who does IP, and that'll teach you really fast the entrepreneurial track, or at least it becomes part of your DNA. So that's really how it all happened. And our parents were very much not the immigrants that were about losing your roots and assimilating completely. They were exactly the opposite. They were very much about know where you come from, know what that means, speak fluent Spanish, you still have family back home, they're still a relevant part of your life, and it's important. And it gives you a good sense of identity and sort of grounds you. At least it grounded us. It was really great.
No, that's awesome. So now you grew up, or started growing up in Argentina, moved to the US, moved around a bit, went through high school, and then I think you went off to college initially in France and studying
No,
a few different majors.
I went off to college initially in the States and then went to France and ended up studying political science, history, and psychology. So, but started my work journey very early. I think having immigrant parents may do that to you. So started my work journey at 12 babysitting. And then at 14, my father looked at me and he's like, don't you think it's time you get a real job? And I was like, I'm 14. And he's like, yeah, you're 14, go to work. So I started my world in retail. That's how I got into retail fashion, was at 14. I worked at the local fashion boutique, in New York, where I was going to high school, and taught me a lot. She was, I was just actually referring to the founder. She now has 7 stores throughout outside the city. And she was just also an incredible entrepreneurial spirit and leader, and taught me a huge amount of work ethic and fashion and merchandising and design. And I really appreciated everything she taught me. So that sort of led my work journey, which was different than my studying journey, though I feel like I brought it all together, because I think that when you do product development, merchandising, marketing, branding, sales, there's so much psychology in it. And also there's political science and history in it, right? Is understanding, depending what markets. I worked a lot in international markets after that when I came back from France, and I worked a lot in South America and Europe and Asia, as you mentioned. And I think a lot of those elements of political science, understanding the politics of countries, understanding the history of countries, understanding consumer psychology, and bringing it all together when you're developing the product and trying to sell, I think is a huge deal. So it's not like I would change what I studied. I loved what I studied, but I feel like I really do use it every day, because I don't just put together a strategy without consideration of history, politics, and psychology.
So now let's or back up or just expand a bit. So you went into college. You started out undergraduate doing, the psychology and doing, kind of sounds like, as we talked a little bit, your original intent was to go be a lawyer, like a lot of the people in the family. Now, as you're coming out of college, how did you figure out that maybe it wasn't going to be the legal route that you're going to go? In other words, how did you kind of come to that realization, or was it kind of a gradual thing, or kind of how did you figure out where you were going to go?
It was a gradual thing. I would definitely say, because my grandfather was an attorney as well. My uncle's an attorney. Half my mom's cousins in Argentina are attorneys. So I sort of woke up at 20 and was like, do I really want to be an attorney? Or is it that half of my family is lawyers and this is what I know, right? And so I had that sort of moment of, is this really what I'm expected to do? Do I really want to do this? Or, is it what I've been sort of groomed to do? And so it was a bit of a gradual process. And I guess working in retail and fashion since the age of 14, it sort of was a natural fit for me. And moving into my very first startup was a trend magazine in the world of fashion and sports, and bringing together my two loves, because I was also an athlete my whole life, and played a whole bunch of sports and played some college sports. And so I kind of brought together my love of fashion and my love of sports, and this whole athleisure and sports and fashion coming together. And so my very first startup was a trend magazine for the industry. And that was really natural for me. I don't know. I just partnered up with a friend of mine, and we were like, should we go take pictures around the street and show trends and, tell people what's happening on the streets and uniting fashion and sports? And it ended up being something really successful without, being 22 years old. And we thought, well, this is fun. It's an excuse to do something fun. And that led to developing fashion and merchandising and product development, both in South America and Asia. And then I sort of got bored with apparel because a t-shirt's a t-shirt and a button's a button. And I was just like, okay, well, where else can I go with this? And I fell in love with footwear development and product development of footwear because I looked at it more as an architectural design. People don't always realize how much work actually goes into developing a sneaker. You know, there's a lot of thought process, and there's a lot of concept of the foot and all these elements. And I became really fascinated, and that's where I ended up spending a tremendous amount of time in Asia and Taiwan, China, and Hong Kong, and living in factories and really developing product for other brands, which was really fun and really interesting, and very creative. And again, putting on the hat of so I took it from the product development and working with designers and to implementation and marketing strategy and sell-through strategy. So it was great because I really had the freedom to do from A to Z, and it wasn't like I was just handing off the design. So that was super exciting for me as well. And then, after many years of living between Asia, South America, Europe, and the US, I became sort of tired, and I was like, okay, I need to stop doing this. And I took a step back and I looked at the sports industry and media, and I took a pay cut and I moved into branding and marketing for sports networks and television and media, and eventually grew in that position and became a creative director of a Latin American sports network throughout the region in Portuguese and Spanish at the same time. So that was great. And eventually that got sold and became Fox in Espanol.
No,
and then,
go ahead.
Yeah. And so then I went into a professional golf league of Latin America, because again, it was an easy transition. I had a relationship with ESPN. It made a lot of sense. And then I was exhausted again. I was like, okay, I've now lived on planes again. So yeah, it was sort of, but it's a logical transition. It's always been about health and wellness and sports and fashion and understanding people and consumers. So I feel like my whole career has been sort of one transition to the other within similar worlds or speaking to similar consumers, maybe.
No, definitely makes sense. Now you were traveling quite a bit, working in the fashion product development industry, getting a lot of experience. Now you also mentioned that you started to get tired of the travel, and I think a lot of people do. You travel for a while, and originally it's kind of fun. You get to see a lot of the different parts of the world and get to or go and or have a lot of experiences. And after a while, you're saying, hey, I just want to settle down, or I don't want to be living on an airplane all the time. So now, as you have that realization, kind of what did you figure out what you were going to do? Was it, hey, we're going to go and approach the company and say, I don't want to travel as much? Or you also mentioned coming from more of an entrepreneurial family. And so was it kind of, hey, I want to do my own thing? Or kind of how did you, as you're saying, I want to take maybe a break from having to do travel all the time, how did you figure out what that next step was?
Great question. So, when I came back from Asia, like I said, I decided I didn't want to be living in Asia in the factory. So I searched out, spoke to a bunch of people, and that's where I ended up working for a sports network, thinking, oh, I can do marketing and branding and be at New York or Miami based. That doesn't happen in my life, Devin. So after a while, I was right back in the craziness of traveling nonstop and being a creative director for a network that has 35% live programming throughout the region of South America, and also having to negotiate and things going on with sports product coming out of Europe, and then we launched the U.S. Hispanic market. So so then eventually when that sold, the only way for me to actually take a break in my personality, Devin, was I retreated to the beach in Uruguay for about 3 months and took a sabbatical, and basically lived a fantastic life, worked out every day, ate really healthy, and just did a lot of meditation, yoga, workouts, to try to regroup, and did that for a bit. And then I came back and I got offered being the business development director for this Latin American golf tour. And again, based out of Miami. And I was like, oh, this can be sort of a cushy job, right? How hard could it be? No, 12 tournaments in 9 countries. Again, Devin went right back to the plane. I was like, how does this keep happening to me? And then eventually that got sold. And I was like, great, here's my chance. And then I got a call if I be interested in doing some consulting work for a wellness center in South America, in Uruguay. And I said, sure, why not do this for a little while? And then that turned into 10 years of running a facility. And again, taking consulting projects in New York on a facility and operations and turning that wellness center around, and then turning the one in South America around, and again, running around like a crazy person. And then woke up at 40 and was like, okay, now I'm out. I'm done. Like, what else can I do? I back to living in like 2 continents at the same time, not 3 or 4, but 2. And that's when I decided to take a break and study some integrative therapy and alternative medicines, and created my second startup, which was Mariposa Wellness, which was basically for myself, Devin, to teach the world what I felt I needed, which is how to cope with stress and stress management, and living in multiple continents on multiple time zones, working in multiple languages, and how can I help me, that sort of crazy busy professional. And so I created the company after taking about 3 or 4 years to study and really do internships and work in hospitals. And I worked in Haiti, and did a bunch of things. And I did some consulting work on what I knew on the side as well, just to keep going. But eventually launched Mariposa Wellness, and taught employees of hospitals and corporations how to deal with everyday life challenges and stress. And eventually that led me to Motivity Care, which is about caring for the caregiver that cares for the elder loved ones.
So now what kind of put you, I mean, I get it in the sense that it's kind of where you were already headed, but how did you figure out? Because I mean, you got the current business, you're doing that, but how did you kind of settle on this is what I'm going to do, or this is now the direction I'm going to take take a break? Because startups and doing your own business and being an entrepreneur isn't a break, but it's a different set, and it gives you a bit more control. And, sometimes even if you're working as much time, it still gives you a bit of a ability to captain your own future and decide, how you want to set up that. But how did you kind of settle in or figure out that's where you wanted to go?
Mariposa was really, I would say it was really, for as cliche as this may sound, it was really a calling. I like to say I was just sitting in my computer doing consulting work, helping a couple of businesses turn around and restructure their operations, and I was just sat there like, I'm exhausted. This is just, it's too much. I'm done. Companies I worked for sold, and then worked for another one and sold, and now I'm doing this, and I just wasn't really filled with any of it at that point. And I just sat there, and I like to say, I'm not sure how this came across my computer, but there was the Urban Zen Integrative Therapy program, which is a specific year-long program in alternative therapies and integrative therapy. And I literally came across my computer and I applied. And I was like, this is it. This is amazing. This brings together my love of health and well-being. It brings together my understanding of operations of wellness. It brings together the fact that throughout my career, living the way I did, the thing that saved me from being obese or addicted to any kind of drugs or alcohol or anything was having a practice and having a toolbox to cope with stress. And I was that crazy person that got off the airplane in Hong Kong and got on the treadmill to deal with jet lag, right? I was the person that traveled around Asia and was very careful about what she was eating. Things like that. And I think it really helped me throughout my career. on my well-being side and my health. So I felt like, wow, this is going to bring it all together. And I then studied alternative physical therapy, and I kind of created a program, like I said, based on what I thought I needed and could help people. And really, and the reason I then transitioned mostly into hospital work was because I think there is truly the caregiver that takes care of others doesn't take care of themselves. So really the mission statement in Mariposa Wellness is, how do you educate caregivers to better take care of themselves? And then COVID hit, and COVID was a huge challenge because my business was all in person, and I had 8 instructors working for me, and I had clients throughout the US, and all of it was in person. And then March of 2020 hit, and it's a big lesson for an entrepreneur to, how do you pivot and how do you then survive, right? And convert your entire business online when all your educational programming and thought process is an in-person concept, right? And so that tradition, I made the transition, but it just wasn't the same. And throughout this, unfortunately, I had to start taking care of my elder parents. Prior, I had taken care of my elder grandparents in Argentina as well. And I've always been the primary caregiver for everybody. I think it's also innate in me, being the eldest daughter of, 4 and 3 brothers. I feel like, you're sort of in a Latin home. You are the caregiver. That's just your role. And so through having to take care of my parents and trying to make my company survive, my current business partner and I had known each other from the industry for many years and had collaborated and had strategic alliances. And we started talking, and we spent talking for about a year about how difficult, frustrating, exhausting, and costly it is to take care of your elder loved ones, because she's always been the primary caregiver as well. And in March of 21, we had an aha moment. We're like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Let's come up with a better way to do this. Let's bring together all of our professional experience. She has lots of experience or decades of experience in health and well-being and wellness and insurance and benefits design and insurance underwriting and brokers. And I had, at that point, years of experience in being a vendor to companies on mental health and wellness, right? And we said, okay, and we had decades of experience taking care of our elder loved ones. And we said, how do we bring this together and create something useful for society? And that's how Motivity Care was created.
No, it sounds like it was sometimes not necessarily the transition we asked for, or the changes what we or always want, but or a lot of times to look at that, when you look back, it pushes the company in a better direction and helps you to expand and otherwise address, or reach new markets that you might otherwise never have explored. So it sounds like it was a forced transition, but overall a good one that put you on the path to where you guys are at now. So well, now as we've kind of reached the present day of your journey, great time to transition to the 2 questions always asked towards the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what'd you learn from it?
It's a great question. I would probably say one of the worst business decisions I ever made was putting the wrong price to something. Lately I've been talking a lot about pricing strategy and how do you price something, whether it's to the consumer or whether it's to a corporate client. And I remember when I launched Mariposa Wellness, I had this. I was very dead set on, I was sort of that stubborn entrepreneur, and I was like, this is what it's going to cost, and this is what you're going to pay me, and this. Not smart, Devin. Not smart. People were like, no. And I was like, what do you mean no? And then I had to go back and revamp the entire thing and really sit down and think, okay, who am I talking to? Who's my end consumer, and how is that pricing going to be received, right? And it was a great lesson, and that led to another even better lesson, I would say, because then the flip side happened. So when I finally became sort of secure and comfortable in my pricing, and I was like, no, this is a solid, and this is what I'm worth, and this is what people are willing to pay. And I had a few years already of people paying that, right? Then I had a bunch of people come to me and say, well, I can get this done for this amount of money, or I can pay this person this. And so I said, go ahead, sure. If you can get the same work, or what you believe is the same work for that amount of money, then please do hire that person, because give them the opportunity. This is where I'm at. This is a proven pricing. I've now been doing this for 5 years. People seem to react. Like I said, a big mistake I made in the beginning was coming out way too high. But I think I found a sweet spot.
No, I think that, that one's always, it's hard because of this. At one point, when you're getting started, you either go one of two directions: either price yourself way too high because you overvalue what you can deliver, or it's more of, you're unproven, right? So, when you're, or don't have a track record, when they don't have as deep of experience, asking people to take a chance on you and pay a lot of money, is kind of hard to balance. And yet, on the other hand, if you price yourself so low that you can't make a living out of it, and it doesn't make sense, and you're not able to run a business off of it, it also doesn't make sense. So I think that's one where certainly an easy error to mistake on, or a way to make, or mistake to make on either side, but also always a good learning experience.
Yeah, and then fortunately, 3-4 months later, they came back and they said, "You're right. It's not the same product." I said, "Great, let's do this." So it's an interesting lesson. I really valued it. It's just understanding that balance between what you consider yourself to be worth and what people are willing to pay for your services.
Absolutely. So now we'll jump to the second question, which is, so if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Oh, my favorite piece of advice, which I seem to be talking a lot about in every time. Please don't be afraid to pivot. I find that's another lesson I learned, and I'm so grateful for it, is I find sometimes as entrepreneurs or small businesses, we sometimes think we know best, or this is really what we want to do, and we want to launch it this way, and we want to implement it into the market this way, and we're not going to change it. And sort of we get stuck in our ways and become stubborn because we are the founder, right? Which is logical. It's not that it's not. But it's okay to pivot. It's okay to change, right? It's okay to say, oh, maybe I need to move 10% to the right, and maybe I need to go 20% to the left, and just have that sense of flexibility and not be afraid of it, and to know also who's giving you advice and who you're listening to, but not to be afraid to pivot and move in certain directions and have that flexibility.
No, absolutely. And I think that's it's a hard one because changing what when you start out, you think you know everything and you know what the customer wants, or you're the customer and you know the direction you should take, and so you want to stick on that path. And yet I think having the flexibility to pivot, to listen to consumers, listen to the marketplace, adapt, and to adjust can give you a much stronger foundation to build the business and to find the success. So I think that's definitely a great piece of advice and a great takeaway.
Yeah, it also gives you credibility, right? So like what happened to me when they came to me and said, well, someone can do it for less. And I said, well, go ahead. It gives you also a sense of confidence because you've moved around and you've had that flexibility. So you can also go back and say, listen, I have tested it out. I have been flexible on pricing or whatever it is. And this is where I landed based on experience, knowledge, market fit, market tested.
Absolutely. So, well, now as we do wrap towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
The best way is my email, which is Karina, Karina, at motivitycare.com. Also easily to find me on LinkedIn, Karina Muller on LinkedIn. I am very active on LinkedIn, so you could always message me on LinkedIn. Yeah, and we are actively looking for HR clients. We're actively looking for people in senior living communities, operators of senior living communities. We're actively looking for investors. So, yeah, more than happy to talk to people and have interesting conversations.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, make a new connection, support a great business. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for Karina for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Karina, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much, Devin. This was so much fun, and thank you for giving me a voice and to tell my story. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.